Hello, all. We will be getting started very shortly. I am admitting others into the from the waiting room into the session. We'll be getting started in roughly 2 minutes. Once again, we will be getting started in about a minute. We're just admitting folks that are jumping into the session. Its co-pilot, Sam Lilly, 20 years old and engaged to be married. He was very Good morning and welcome to this edition of the Commission on the Arts and Humanities Business of the Arts. This session is titled The Business of Public Art. My name is Dwayne Lawson Brown, and I'm proud to welcome you. A few housekeeping measures. This session is being recorded and will be placed on our website. So if you are seeking that information again, you can visit the website for the DC Commission on the Arts and Humanities. Please remain silent and on mute during the session. We want to make sure that our panelists are not interrupted as they are sharing. If you look at the status bar just below our faces, you will see three dots above more. If you click more, you'll then see Q&A. If you have any questions or when questions arise during this session, please feel free to add your question to the Q&A and not the chat box. If you're having difficulties hearing us or if you are hoping that something is repeated, you can mention that within the chat. But please place questions into the Q&A box. We'll actually be answering all the questions at the end of the session. Again, we want to make sure that all of our presenters are able to get their information across. And if you have any thoughts, any questions, again, please add those into the Q&A. Again, it is my pleasure to welcome you to this Business of the Arts session. And now I turn it over to our moderator, Kerry Kennedy. Holds a BA in psychology and an MA in art history, museum studies as her focus. Her primary goal is to provide various audiences access to community and civic projects. Carrie's work focuses on expertise gained from working with cultural institutions. Excuse me. Uh, Carrie's work focuses on expertise gained from working with cultural institutions, museums, botanical gardens, historic homes, buildings, public art programs, and performing arts organizations. This breadth of experience adds value when creating community development, placemaking, and heritage tourism projects. Kerry works with the DC Commission on the Arts and Humanities Public Art Program. She is a founding member of the Public Art Exchange and a consultant on the Mellon Foundation's Monument Project. Please welcome Kerry Kennedy. Kerry, you're muted.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Dwayne, for that lovely intro. I'm Kerry Kennedy, as he mentioned, and I'm the public art or one of the public art coordinators at the Commission. Today, the Business of the Arts panel is about the work that comes from the Public Art Building Communities Grant, and that's PABC. That's what we usually call the program. This grant is challenging as public art often requires working with a team, and the PABC grant itself application is a dense one, and it requires a proposal and quite a few required documents and community approvals. The reason CAH requires a proposal for the PABC grant instead of commissioning artists directly is because the commission is a granting agency. And the grants need to be completed in the fiscal year that they are awarded. By starting with a community approved proposal, the grantee has the best chance of being protected from criticisms from various corners of DC and completing the project within the year. In short, the proposal that is submitted with the application protects the artists and the organizations that apply their vision. It protects their vision. As a home for DC residents and an international tourist location, the district creates a great, vibrant landscape for public artwork. Public artwork humanizes the built environment and invigorates community spaces. It also creates an opening for the past, present, and future to commingle, bridging disciplines and ideas. It gives people in the community a chance to interact with art that they can relate to. If the artist has done their job, which means gathering and utilizing community input. Today, we're going to go over a general overview of the PABC grant. Then I'll have artist introductions and share the projects that they were awarded with our grant program. And then we'll have some questions, panel questions with the artists, and then we'll have the Q&A afterwards. Can everyone see the slide deck? There we go. All right. So public art building communities usually opens in spring until mid-July. And there are multiple awards in varying amounts. Individuals can apply for up to $75,000, organizations up to $125,000, and bids, business improvement districts up to $150,000. The Public Art Building Communities Grant Program supports individual artists and organizations in their effort to design, fabricate, and install new temporary or public artworks and connect artists and their artwork with the communities where they're placed. For our legal purposes, public art is defined as an artwork of a variety of media sited and installed onto locations that are accessible to the public without cost and in exterior outdoor locations free of encumbrances. This means that folks can get to the work even if they are covered under ADA policy. Permanent public artwork is defined is existing for a duration of more than a year without a deinstallation plan. And of course, work should require minimal maintenance. And then temporary projects must demonstrate duration of less than 2 years with a deinstallation plan. Materials should be sustainable, low maintenance, and protected by graffiti resistance coatings. And of course, public art is includes, but not limited to, sculptures, mosaics, artistic streetscapes, murals, paintings in outdoor plazas, mixed media, paving patterns, media and digital installations, landscape designed work, custom benches, stained glass installations, and artistic arches, gates, or railings. Performance-based works or works that have been previously funded are ineligible for funding in the grant program, and the CAH grant funds must be spent within the fiscal year of October 1st to September 30th. These are some examples of public artworks that have been commissioned, and it gives you an idea of the variety of projects we do fund. Swept Yard by Curry Hackett and Patrick Madonna, FY24. This is a landscaped park with seating elements and a curved path that has concrete and gravel components. The smaller planks that you see in this walkway include engravings of narrative and artwork that were created by some of the community members at the start of this project. And if you look at the signage, you can barely see the QR code. And if you were to activate that QR code, you then get access to the community's archive. We also have 40 Acres Camp Barker by Sandy Williams III. And this is a 6,500 pound plus wax sculpture. The interactive component is that folks were given information on the promises made by President Lincoln, and they were able to light this candle individually as they interacted with the work. Again, this was a temporary artwork. We have Swing 2 by Foon Sham with Golden Triangle Bid. And again, there are so many documents and permit verification letters and permitting that go with the project. We want to make sure people understand you're putting work in a public space. You may need cranes, you may need lifts. And again, that's why some of the reasons why the application is so dense. Here we have Neighbors and Friends, Mazi Mustafa and Kate DeCiccio. Again, a community mural. And we also have Found by Ira Tattleman. Again, a lot of community input and engagement. So Ira Tattleman worked with local DC artists to create a series of workshops where they had the artists and Ira bring in recyclable material. And then they invited the public to bring in recyclable material, things that they were wanting to discard, so that they could look at how you can recycle materials, how you can look at having more of an understanding of how waste affects climate change. The artists work with the public, and they came in for a series of 3 weekends and workshops where the public created their own sculptures, and then those sculptures, starting on Earth Day, were exhibited at Alethea Tanner Park on 3 different Saturdays. So again, these are the type of projects we're excited to commission at our agency. So the program goals of the Public Art Project or program are to encourage the creation and installation of original high-quality public artworks within the District of Columbia, develop meaningful opportunities to connect artists to communities, provide exposure and participation to the community in the public art making process, further learning or discovery opportunities that may be present through public art installations, support the creation of public art by DC resident artists and organizations, promote robust and diverse artistic expression that resonates with residents of the District of Columbia, and contribute to the District of Columbia's public art collection in the built environment. I'm reading these goals because whenever you write a narrative for this grant, it would be a good idea to kind of check and see if your narrative is matching the goals of the program. It really gives you something to go, is my project going to support the goals of the program? I spoke about how dense this application is. I'm not going to read through all these documents, but if you're thinking about applying for this program, this list should let you know now is the time to start, because with this proposal, you're coming with renderings, project designs, architectural sketches if they're required, work samples, your permit verification letters from our partner agencies, the Department of Buildings, the Department of Transportation, the Department of Planning, Historic Preservation, and if your project is going to be in a park, the Department of Parks. Also your ANC letter and community outreach flyers and community support signatures. There are also compliance documents from the district that are required, statements of certifications, lists of insurance carriers, your IRS information. And then, if you're an organization, there are a few more documents. So again, I cannot press upon folks enough to know now is the time to get started if you're interested in working on this application. So I'm going to move into talking about our panelists for a second, and then we'll get started with our questions. So our panelists today are Monica Jahan Bose, and she's a DC-based artist and a Bangladeshi American artist and climate activist whose work spans painting, printmaking, film, performance, and installation. Her socially engaged work highlights the intersection of climate, racial, gender, and economic justice through co-created workshops, art actions, and temporary installations and performances. Monica's most recent work was Swimming, FY24, and Swimming is a large-scale temporary site-specific work and sound walk at an outdoor plaza at the Marie Reed Elementary School and Aquatic Center. Blue Bangladeshi saris were configured in irregular shapes to evoke a swimming pool. And it was meant to suggest a massive swell of water. She also had a sound walk with QR codes that tell this history behind the project with poetry, music, and video. This project that she worked with the students and residents of DC and Bangladesh speaks to the inequities with regard to swimming and climate change. She had workshops that included ASL, Spanish language interpretation, and stipends for participants. She used sari material with woodblock prints, where folks who participated in her workshops added to the sari material, creating different imagery and written words on the project. This is her invitation to her dedication. I'd like to share this because, again, it shows how Monica worked through the community, working with curators, different media folks that supported her projects, her installation folks, her community partners, the Adams Morgan Partnership Bid, Marie Reed Elementary School and Aquatic Center, the DC Art Center, Calvary Women's Center Services, and the Moms Clean Air Force. Because again, it shows how public art dollars tend to recycle within the communities where they are commissioned. So again, it's just a good example of how the public art dollars are recycled throughout our communities. Southwest Bid is represented by Jessie, and she's the Director of Public Space for the Southwest Bid. In her role, she oversees placemaking efforts, including public art projects and community events. She is passionate about revitalizing public spaces to foster connections and amplify the identity of a community. Jessie has successfully implemented over 40 public art installations at the Bid. This work I'm going to show is Gallery of Southwest, Celebrating the Past, Present, and Future, FY23. It was a gallery-style mural installation featuring 12 different murals by 11 different artists. This work was celebrating the past, present, and future of Southwest and depicted images of community, historical heroes, and the built and natural landscapes that are there. This mural dimensions were on two sides of the 395 underpass, and it measured 12 feet high by 22 feet wide on both sides of the underpass. So this gives you an idea of the draft, also the artists listed. And here are some close-ups and detail. I'm going to show another project from Southwest Bid that is currently under installation fabrication. It's Southwest Living Rooms, and it's FY25. The Southwest Business Improvement created a work with artist Bruce Willen. And again, organizations select artists to create their artworks. And They're going to be at 6 bus stops in the old Southwest neighborhood, which will help to bring the streetscape to life and actually respond to a need in the community for seating. These are functional sculptures that are modeled after living rooms and create welcoming spaces for folks when they are waiting for transportation. So the idea is that they're extending their living room where people entertain, exchange ideas, and gather with friends and neighbors. So these are the different designs, and you can see the artwork set at a bus stop with no seating. I'm going to stop sharing and again introduce our artists and start with the questions. So, um, these former and current public art creators will explain how they navigate the team sport of public art. And I say team sport because at its best, public art takes input from the community, developers, advisory neighborhood committees, governmental agencies, and the permitting agencies, and still maintain their or the artist's vision. So I wanted to get started with our panelists. And this question is for each of you, and I guess we can just kind of start, whoever wants to jump in. What is your definition of public art? Um, Anton, if you wanted to start.
Yeah. The way I think of public art is it's about access. It's about purpose. Access in terms of, a lot of art that's made, especially the, fine art or contemporary art, right? There's barriers to get to it, right? And so public art kind of gets rid of those barriers, which I think for me, as someone who grew up having those barriers, that's really important. But also like in terms of public art, the purpose of it, right? I feel like public art, for me, in order for something to qualify as public art, it needs to like benefit or add to the community, not extract from the community. And so, like, so who's behind the work, right? So if like an artist goes and puts something up on a billboard, like that's adding something to the community. But if like Coca-Cola puts something on a billboard, that's marketing. They're like trying to extract something. And so like it's the intentionality behind it as well.
Thank you for your lovely answer. And I just realized I did not go through your project, so I'm going to switch back really quickly. Um,
I didn't want to say anything, but it's fine.
I'm so glad you did not. There we go. So Anton worked with the project with the Nicholson Project in FY23, and it's Mythic Futures. And Mythic Futures was a 4-part Afrofuturistic mural, and with each one in the quadrant of DC. So each of the murals was in a different quadrant. Um, they were gateways to an imagined, liberated Black future featuring mythological deities that the artist had imagined that embody radical ways of existing that highlight the beauty of Black life while subverting the status quo. Each site-specific mural ranged in scale, and there were 2 large murals that were 20 by 20 and another 20 by 40. And then there were 2 other smaller murals that were about 8 to 10 feet in height. All 4 murals consisted of a physical and a digital component, and people were able to engage the murals using augmented reality, which created another layer of visual and auditory experience. Each mural, utilizing AR customized for Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, revealed the narratives behind those images and incorporated sound and visual elements that bring the artwork to life. So it helped to encourage folks to visit each mural across the city. So we have Wasame, the mythic being of intersectionality, was at 2106 Vermont Avenue Northwest, Ward 1. We have Enim, the mythic being of self-care, that was at 1333 H Street, Northeast, Ward 6. Tuma, the mythic being of progression, located at 800 9th Street Southwest, Ward 6. And Ayana, the mythic being of culture, located at 2310 Nicholson Street, Southeast, Ward 7. So again, I'm going to switch back to our panelists. Monica, if you wanted to tell us what was your definition of public art?
Well, I like to say that I want to put the public into public art. And so that means for me that the public is involved in some of the making of the project, involved in activating the project. For me, that's been an important part of it, that I've actually made the public into co-creators and fabricators of the project. And so that's been, I like to do collaborations, and it's really great to have people involved. So one of the projects I did, I had about, I think 300 people in DC were involved in working on the saris and writing poetry and doing drawings and woodblock printing. So but yeah, I definitely access, again, what Antoine said, access is very important. I think in DC, I've found that many people that have joined my public art projects have not been to the museums or galleries, but they did join these workshops, which were advertised more broadly, I guess. And a lot of them during the pandemic, I've had outdoor workshops as well. So I also try to make the spaces where I have my workshops accessible so that people can get to them. There's no stairs. They can get there by metro. I also do provide interpretation and stipends. And during the pandemic, I provided internet stipends and Zoom lessons for folks. So yeah, so I like to get the public involved in the art.
Jessie?
Sure. I'll kind of echo what they've both said. I think at its core, public art is accessible to the public. But I think that is also an essential tool for highlighting an existing community and strengthening the story of the community. I also agree that it's helpful when the community participates in it. If it's not directly related to the story of the community, they should have input. They should be able to participate somehow. So kind of combination of what has already been said.
Okay. For our artists on the panel, how is public art different from your studio practice?
So I mean, well, I'll just say overall, like for me personally, I don't really differentiate, right?
That's
It's
interesting.
part of it, right? Like it's not this completely separate thing. It's just a different way of working sometimes. So I feel like it is just part of the practice. However, yeah, for me, like public art is a lot more so collaborative, right? So usually you're like interacting with other folks, you have to work with other folks, you're getting something that's very different than how I work. Like you have to get approval like for certain things. And it's a process, right? So, you submit ideas, images, or you do a proposal and you wait to hear back. In regard to working with Nicholson, like I'm working with like, this nonprofit when I'm in my studio, and also it's like there's a specific ideal usually where it's like, oh, this is the idea I want to install or put up, and these are the people I want to work with. When I work in studio, it's a lot different in that like I don't even have like an end goal. It's just I'm making, and then that could take 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, or whatever it is. So different different realities, different skill sets for each one.
Monica?
Well, yeah, I think that public art certainly, yeah, especially because there's approvals involved and trying to get funding involved, you do have to come up with a plan and a timeline, and it's different from other studio projects, which can be more open-ended. I think it is a little bit different. I mean, I think my studio practice involves painting and other kinds of projects, but it's a little bit different, I think, from my public art projects, but I've tried to incorporate most of the things. I mean, we end up doing painting on the saris, and there's performance. Performance has been a big part of my practice for a long time. And so even though performance is not part of the public art grant, there are performative aspects that, that are used to activate the installations that I put on. So it's still tied to my practice in so many ways. I think, yeah, it's really kind of a continuous practice, really, all the work.
One of the things that makes public art interesting for me is the beautiful aesthetics that come out from different folks with different backgrounds. So can you tell us a little bit, and again, this is for the artists, we'll get back to you, Jessie, I promise, how does your vision come to you, and how do you then project it out onto the landscape, and how do you select imagery? Can you tell us a little bit about that, and how, and like you say, how the public arts process kind of it can chip away at that? So how do you maintain your vision of what you want to put out there?
Yeah, I mean, it's usually an extension of what I'm already doing. Um, so I can be a bit more specific. The Mythic Futures project that I did in DC, it's actually sort of the second iteration of a sort of a piece I'm already working on. Like I did a residency at the Center for Afrofuturist Studies a few years prior, and so I'm coming up with this sort of historical fiction narrative, but I'm trying to tell this narrative via like different media. And so the first iteration was like an hour-long sound piece that was on experimental radio. And so like, and then the piece in DC was like, oh, wow, it'd be really cool if I can tell this through these murals that like are interacting with like people within like communities. And so but if you back up even further, it all comes from like kind of like the research and the things that I'm like already interested in for me, which is surrealism, Afro-surrealism, folklore, things of that sort. And so it's an extension from that. So I'm not making much of a leap when I have to then now in this case, right, like work with like a nonprofit, the Nicholson, to like fill out a proposal. So it's not like I'm reinventing the wheel. So regardless of all the admin stuff, which to be honest for me, it's like tough. The creative stuff I'm still like energized by the creative stuff because I really want to see this come to fruition. So
Monica?
Well, I think one thing that I forgot to mention, and it ties into your question as well, is for me, the public art is very site specific. So the idea for the project comes from, usually it comes from the site. Like I'll be thinking, I really do, I used to do performances outdoors, and I still do. And so working outdoors has been a big part of my practice for a long time. And so I'm always looking for sites that I want to activate. So when I see a site, that's possibly an interesting place to put one of my projects, I start thinking about, okay, what is the history of this site? What is the site? Why is it interesting? And so that is part of the process, right? I'll do research. I'll do research into, what is this building? What happens here? What is the history of this site? So like the Marie Reed project that you showed the slides for, I walk by there all the time. And I was thinking, oh, one day it sort of occurred to me. I said, gosh, this would be an interesting spot. So many people hang out here. There's this beautiful plaza, but it has no color. It needs to be activated with art. And then how does this tie in? And I started thinking, well, my kids went to the neighboring school, and what's the history? That used to be the Adams School. So I started doing research and thinking about. So that is, a site. Thinking about the site is a very important part of public art, I think. For me, for a lot of installation artists, like, why are you activating that spot? How does the built environment there? How is it going to the DC environment? How are you going to change it, either temporarily or permanently, with the work that you're putting in there? How does it relate to that community, right? And to the history of the land there? You could be looking at more recent things that happened, or you could be going back. So I think public art does to be meaningful, it is helpful to do research, of the site. That's something I wanted to mention. And I think the research and the stories behind the site can inspire. And so that's what happened with me. I was literally walking by the site and thinking, maybe I should do something here. And then I started thinking about, oh, my kids used to swim in this pool, and what's the history? And let's think about, right, the whole neighborhood and segregation. Adams Morgan, the name of the neighborhood comes from the combination of those two schools, desegregation. And so it really tied in. So I would say, yeah, I think it's really interesting to think about the site and history and stories, whether of current residents or past residents, or, there's a lot of interesting stories. These are all DC projects, PABC, if that's what you're applying for. But for any site that you're doing an installation for, I think it's interesting to think about. And that gives you ideas for what you're going to create, right? And how I think that can be an important thing to think about the site itself. Some artists, for example, will also think about the kind of soil that's on the site, what materials they want to use. I mean, there's different ways you can go. I don't know if I
Thank
answered
you.
your question. I
You
may have
did, you
gone off
did.
on a tangent.
And you actually, no, you did. And you actually helped me because now it ties into Jesse's project, Gallery of the Southwest, celebrating the past, present, and future. So, Jesse, how did you curate these 11 different artists to create these 12 murals in this underpass? And when and it's you truly, when you walk through or if you drive through, it makes sense. So, how did you do that? How did you accomplish that?
Yeah. I also want to echo that the site was a huge influence of why we chose that space. It is under 395, which has like it's urban renewal. It tore through tore through the city. The Southwest neighborhood was kind of split into two. It is kind of a key emblem of urban renewal in the city. And so we wanted to kind of reknit the two spaces and reknit the community. And so that's why we chose that space as part of this project, and why we chose the theme of past, present, and future of Southwest. We picked our artists. We always try to do an RFP or RFQ process. That way we can get the community involved. We can be fair. We think it's so important to have community serve on our selection committee so that we have community input and community buy-in. And the artworks that were selected just really spoke to the community about kind of what it could mean. So we have depictions of building and the construction process and the renewal process, and there are snails and slugs carrying buildings on their back, so it's kind of showing the slow growth over time. We have images of important spaces in Southwest, the duck pond, the wharf. We have pictures of those portrayed. We have images of important historical figures, Dorothy Height. We have pictures or depictions of just kind of what community means to people and just their interpretation of community. So that's how we selected the art we did. We wanted all different styles, all different types of artists, different experience levels. That's important. It's important to give new artists a chance to break into this world. So that's kind of a little bit of how we chose what we did and why it is where it is.
How, what was the artist selection process like for that project?
So we did an RFQ, a two-phase RFP. So an RFQ and then an RFP. So we asked for qualifications. From those qualifications, we narrowed it down to, I think we selected 11 artists. I think we narrowed it down to like 15 or so to submit proposals. We always try when we can to pay artists at the proposal phase. I think that's really important as an administrator, to pay artists for their time and their effort. And then we worked with a committee of maybe 6 or so community stakeholders, the ANC, artists who live in the neighborhood, um, folks who have just been in the neighborhood for many years, business owners, um, just different kinds of people to serve on our selection committee to help us narrow it down.
Okay. That sounds great. So I'm going to go switch back to Antoine because you're an artist who worked with an organization, the Nicholson Project. How did you select your 4 sites for your murals?
Yeah, like as you said, like I worked with the Nicholson, and I think for us it was, especially like me being a I don't live in DC. And so I worked with like working with like Allison Nance, who's the director there, working with her a lot in choosing spaces. So for us, it was important that it was in because DC, as I understand, is divided into 4 quadrants. And so, given the ideal of the project, we wanted to have work in each quadrant because we wanted people to be able to sort of move throughout the city and to then like sort of move throughout the city, have these gathering spots at each mural. And so as a way of sort of navigating the city. And so the choosing the spots was, a lot of that linked on the Nicholson because they knew how to navigate the spaces. And so it was a lot of working with communities. Actually, one was at Nicholson, which was like amazing because there's this like the Nicholson is located in this really beautiful like community that's there. And so so they were like Allison was really great at like finding various communities in Nicholson and I'm sorry, various communities like around DC and like working with like the business owners, people in the community in terms of like getting permission to be in those spaces.
Yeah, because you have to get 4 ANC approvals. That's a lot.
Yeah.
So that's good that they helped with that.
No, yeah. Hey,
Awesome.
all on Allison gets all the praise for that, right? Like, so yeah, she was amazing.
Um, and that leads into one of my questions. Jesse, since you're the administrator here, sometimes organizations or bids have difficulty communicating with their artists. And from what we just heard from Anton, it's really kind of a intertwined relationship where you have the artist, his vision, but you have the organization that the artist is working through, navigating DC permitting, navigating DC ANCs, the neighborhood advisory groups, and navigating community engagement. Um, how do you manage or coordinate with artists? And you can talk about that in general, but also with you and you engaged with 11. And if you did that, through the FQ process, that's fine. You can tell us that. But how do you manage that as an administrator?
Yeah. Um, I think communication throughout the entire process is huge. I think even if there's no news, we still say there's no news. I think the artists, as you mentioned, they're the lead. This is their vision, this is their project. We are just the project manager, is kind of how I see it. And so coordinating kind of upfront, here's the steps that need to take place. Here is a timeline of when things need to happen. Reiterating kind of what was in the grant and what we said we would stick to in terms of timeline and budget and things like that. But I working with 11 artists, I think we just constantly were like, I mean, so this project was delayed a year because of some unforeseen circumstances in construction. And so throughout that whole process, we were just saying, there's no news. There's still delays. We will let you know when there is updates. Coordinating scheduling is challenging with 11 artists. We did all the murals in the month of July or June. And so kind of figuring out what equipment people need. How are people going to share equipment? What time of day do they want to come and install? So kind of being just the project manager and letting them know the parameters of the project, but then kind of also allowing them the freedom to do their artwork and do their vision and let it happen, I think is really important.
Okay, that sounds great. Um, for Jesse and Monica, if this applies, Antoine, you can chime in, but I think this is more for Jesse and Monica. How do you approach your partnerships, the people that help support your projects?
Well, for me, I mean, I try to, even though all the projects that I've done have been individual artists, not, nonprofit or bid, but I always do try to, communicate with the bid in the neighborhood where I am and get to know other, businesses and obviously the owner of whatever site it is. But I try to, get them involved and make sure that they're on board and they're into it. And then I've found other partners in the city, some of them that I've worked with for a long time. I've been working with certain organizations in the city where I do workshops with their members. So those folks I've had some partners that have been around for a while that partner with me on stuff. It's helpful because because I'm really managing the project. So it's helpful to have some other groups involved that will, send the word out and things like that. So I do try to find partners. Like I did a project at the Line Hotel and the Line, DC, of course, I think that now they're on the block. But that was a great partnership. Their creative director of the hotel actually came out from LA and was interested in my idea, and he actually had some great ideas for the project, and they had their engineering team help me install these huge fabric wraparounds on the line hotel columns. I mean, originally I was thinking I would just drape them, but then he was like, our engineers can help you. We could do a wraparound if that's and go all the way around. So that was a great partnership, with a private company with their team. And then yeah, I try to find different kinds of partners, but it's always good to work with bids for sure. Even if it's not a bid managed project, it's and the bid where I live in Adams Morgan, and during the pandemic, I started doing things more that were close by. They actually told me, we would like to have you do a project here. We need to activate these spaces. So it is helpful to talk to people in the neighborhoods where you have connections, where you live, where you have friends, to try to talk to people to find out, it's hard to find the space. That's the hardest thing. And to talk to people and find out like what spaces, need to be activated. That's something I really recommend. So some of my partners have really just come and once I did a project, people would come to me and say, oh, next we want you, we would love to have something here. Do you have any ideas? So I think it's good to talk to people in the community for sure. And find out what the needs of the community are. And that includes residents, homeowners, just residents who live there, and also businesses, right? Shops and things in the neighborhood, and the bid. The bid is a good start because they know a lot of the people in the neighborhood.
Jessie?
Yep. I think there's a lot of different partnerships that bids work with when doing art projects. It's who's funding the project. Sometimes that's us. Sometimes it's the commission or a grant. Sometimes it's getting sponsorship from an entity that would be a stakeholder in a project. Who's approving the space or who owns the space. A lot of times working on private property that's accessible to the public is a lot easier than working in true public space, because you don't have to go through DDOT and CFA and get all sorts of different approvals. And the community is important, as we've mentioned a bunch. I think the community is the easiest to forget about because they don't have they don't have to be an active participant, but it's really important when they are in order for something to be successful. And then I think when we partner with artists, as I mentioned, we always try to do RFP, RFQ if we can. And that kind of helps us pick who's qualified, who is showing work that is reflective of the community, who's passionate about the project. If we're in a situation where we are selecting an artist, we always try and look at past work, previous work, who kind of would be the best artist to help move the story we want to tell forward. So with the benches that we are working on now, we selected Bruce because he has a history of doing these kinds of projects in DC already. He knows the process. He has shown great work. We've worked with him previously. Um, and I think he also believed in the purpose of the project, and that's really, really important. And he could get behind kind of the story we wanted to tell.
When you do your RFQs or your request for proposals, do you interview the artists or is it just based on what you see on paper?
So far, we've just done what we've seen on paper. I think that would be a great thing to do moving forward. Um, a lot of times we try and have an artist on our selection committee if we can for larger projects, just so that we can have that point of view while we're reviewing artworks. Um, Projects in public space, I feel like it's a lot of like you have to move really quick. It's a lot of hurry up and wait. You're moving really quick to get to the point of installation. And then once you're ready to, an artist is selected, it's a lot of waiting and it's a lot of waiting for permits and approvals and making sure that there's no construction or whatever. And so I think we move really quickly through our RFQ process, and if I were more organized, maybe we would have more time to interview folks. Um, so
Well, it's
yeah,
just a question because I think people are just interested in how this relationship works when you find an organization to partner with. So,
yeah. I think it helps if you're, I think, an artist who's interested in working with bids, reach out, even if there's not an active solicitation, and just kind of introduce yourself, say the work you do. I think that's really helpful. It helps us um, be more aware of who you are. I don't want to say it like gives us preference, but if there is a chance that we are working on a project that has to move really quick, it is helpful to know who can do something like that quickly without having to go through the whole um, solicitation process.
that sounds good. I'm going to throw these questions back to Antoine and Monica. You both utilize technology in your projects. And as we know, the world is quickly becoming more digitized and digital. And I think utilizing technology makes projects even more accessible. Can you talk a little bit about why you use technology in your projects and how you use technology in your projects?
Yeah, I can. For me, it sort of boils down to um accessibility again, and then again like community. Um, Thinking about especially coming from more of a like surrealist sci-fi, thinking about like types of spaces that we occupy. And so with like where I've been with mural art, public art, thinking about what's the purpose of this space. And so wanted to create a sort of physical gathering space, but also a digital gathering
You want to
space.
make the wall green?
Yeah. So a digital gathering space as well. And so hence wanting to sort of use technology in that. So people can physically gather, but then they also can gather sort of online
Hey,
space.
Denise.
But those are communities as well. And so what we did is Nicholson. We worked with Capital Interactive, and so at each mural site, there's a QR code. You scan the QR code. It actually takes you on to Instagram. It opens up an Instagram, and then you view the mural through Instagram, and a augmented reality element starts to play, and then an audio plays as well, which is meant to be the deity that you're looking at is speaking to you, and you have the ability to share that. So we actually had in speaking with Josh, who works with Capital Interactive, like we could have like made an app or we like you could have had it where people had to download something and we didn't want to and that we felt like that was then an additional barrier. So we felt like there were already people already had their online communities, like communities on social media. So hence using sort of IG as a way to give them greater access to like, engage their own communities, and then so they can share. And then if they want to, meet in person, they can do that as well. But yeah, just looking at technology kind of more so as just a tool to like gain further access for communities. And just really quickly, I just as an artist, I really love what Jessie was saying about communicating. Nicholson was really great at that, like communicating with the artist, like hearing that, even if it's no news, it's still good too.
Monica?
Technology. Yeah, I hadn't initially planned to use, I had planned to do these fabric mural wrapping things, and then I got the idea. I don't know if it was part of the original proposal, but the very first public art project I did in DC, I ended up making a soundscape back in 2019. And I was capturing, I always document everything I do. I was capturing so many beautiful videos and images that I also had a little slideshow that was at the Anacostia Art Center and a bunch of other buildings in that community. So it was 3 buildings on Good Hope Road, and then 3 buildings, small historic buildings on MLK Avenue. And I ended up doing this slideshow inside the buildings as to sort of augment, right, the experience, and also to show the participants that worked on the project. And then for my next projects, I thought when I put it up, I was like, oh, it would be just great. Wouldn't it have been more amazing if I could have had the images and projections on top of the fabric at night? So for my next project, actually, that's what I proposed. And I engaged Robin Bell, a filmmaker, a projection artist, to work with me on doing. So we collaborated on that project. That was called Warming Waters. That was in Georgetown on the Georgetown Canal. But yeah, technology. And then, that was a 2020 project. And then for that, at the end of it, the pandemic happened. And so our workshops had to move on Zoom. And so, yeah, technology became very important. And I started using, and after that, a couple of other projects, I incorporated QR codes. Yeah, sort of like Antoine, using your phones, right? To be able to because it's complicated. I found that it was really complicated to make the soundscape in the street and have the speakers out, and it's not, it's complicated, and you have to, you can't have it going all the time. And so it's more accessible and less disruptive to have people use their phones to activate the sound. So I worked with folks. I decided, not to have an app, because I've seen that at the Hirshhorn, they have these beautiful sound gardens, but you have to download an app. I find it annoying to have to download another app. I just want it to be more immediate. So we had just QR codes that led to these Vimeo. So we ended up doing, I've done a couple of projects where it's a sound walk, where you walk around the site and you access, but because I have many deaf people involved in the project, I want it to be accessible to people that cannot hear. So they were actually videos. It's a video sound walk. You walk around and you access these little 1 to 3 minute video sound pieces. And I've collaborated with musicians and sound engineers to make these. So it was, so I've made, for the last project, I think I made 6 different short film sound pieces that people could access while walking around the site. And it showed people reciting poetry about swimming and their experiences of water, and also of not having access. And then I also created a film. I've gotten really into making films. I created a short film of about the project and about swimming and inequities and access. And that was projected during an outdoor film screening at the Adams Morgan movie nights, and like 1,000 people saw it, which was amazing because a lot of people come for those movie nights. So it was like a little preview. It was a little 5-minute. So I talked to the Adams Morgan bit about it, and they were like, "Yeah, show us the draft." And we'll be happy to project it. It sounds like a cool idea. So they showed it as a preview to 2 nights. So that was a great way to actually use technology because people were coming. So it's nice to sort of tie things into other events that are happening, right? So more people, especially for short-term projects, so more people can experience it. So that was a great collaboration with Adams Morgan Bid, actually. So they showed my 5-minute film on for their Pride Day. I think that was June 7th or something. And then the following week, June 11th, that was June 11th. And then on Juneteenth, they showed my 5-minute film as a preview to their Juneteenth film as well. So that was really cool to have that. And then people would come in, they were coming in to watch the main feature film, but then they would see the installation when they came down to see it, to see the film. And then they would see this little film about the project and then would go back up and learn more about it. It was kind of cool. It tied into other stuff that was happening in the neighborhood. But that's how I've sort of, the technology sort of happened almost accidentally, sort of organically. So, and I think it's true, right? People do like to learn more about the project and engage with it in a different way. So I think it can be helpful to have, I know me as a viewer looking at art, I like to look at, I like to read the labels. I like to get more information. So I think it's helpful. I think it's been fun for people to see. And people love video, of course.
Sure. Well, thank you. Jessie, you made a mention of one of your projects being delayed because I was very careful to say our projects have to happen in the fiscal year. Can you talk a little bit of what that process was like? Because I get this as the administrator of the grant. I have to be the one to say, yes, we can approve this delay, or no, this is not something that's an external issue. We need you to make this happen within this year. But can you talk a little bit? And again, it also helps people to understand, again, how important it is to have your permitting in order and how to work with the different agencies that may delay your project. So,
Yeah. Before I say that, one other thing about the other question about interviewing people. In all of our RFPs, we ask for a statement. And so we kind of get a little bit about the artist through a statement.
sure.
Okay, but back to the other question. We have hit a lot of road bumps in our big projects. For the underpass, Pepco was doing their citywide utility project, and so they happened to be drilling up the road work at the time we were hoping to install, and so that put us off a long time. Currently for the chairs, we are going to be a little delayed because the chairs are at bus stops and the city is redoing their bus network. And so the bus lines are all shifting. And so it's public art. It's in the public space. There are challenges. You are getting approvals from the city. You have to go in front of the public space committee, and because we're DC, we have to go in front of federal agencies to get approval for a lot of projects that are in historic zones. So planning ahead and knowing these things is really, really helpful. The grant asks for these permit letters ahead of time, but before we do any project, we see, are we in the ships at loose? Are we in these areas that could need federal approval? If they are, how do we tweak and adjust these projects ahead of time so that we can kind of plan for things that could come up? Working with DDOT, how do we plan for unplanned things? And how do we figure out ahead of time, what some of these issues could be? Obviously, it's hard to do, and you're not going to guess, and things come up. And I do think that that's probably one of the most challenging and frustrating parts of this job is that, the underpass we've been working on for 4 years before it actually happened. So I think you just have to know that things could take a long time and things are going to come up. I didn't really answer your question because how do you plan? I think things just happen. There's always something that happens.
You did answer the question because for every public art project, it's something. It may not be permitting, it may not be an agency saying, hey, we're going to work in your space
Yeah.
when you thought you were going to work in your space. But it could be something else. It could be an ANC issue, it can be a community issue, it can be the price of their materials,
Yeah.
gets hit by inflation within the year. So it helps to let people know that it's a normal kind of thing. But
Yeah.
again, you've got that year to kind of work it out. And we appreciate it as administrators of the grant when folks work with us to make sure, again, if that year is not looking good because of external issues, again, they're in communication with us so we can help navigate some of the things for folks too. So it does answer the question. And everybody has a different approach also. So, we're hearing yours. And obviously it works. You've gotten grants and you've been able to put your projects up.
But yeah, another issue we've had, property, if you're working on private property, the property manager changes. They can approve a project and then the next property manager comes in and they say, oh, never mind, we don't have a but like that's not in line with what we want to do. That happens all the time. For the underpass, the property next to the space was going to help provide storage for the artists to store their materials. Property management changed and they're like, nope, we can't do that anymore. So like there's always things.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I want to switch gears and talk about the actual application. So, without giving us too much uh, criticism, a lot of the documents, like I said, they're necessary. They're either required by the district or as a part of the proposal process. We use those documents when things come up on our end, when people are questioning projects. Having the proposal and having all the documentation of who approved the project gives us the leverage to say, they hit all these boxes, these folks have seen the project, and this is a project the community wants. That's a tool for us to help protect, again, the vision of the artists and the organizations. So can you talk about what it was like to go through the application process, and also how long does it take you to put together an application?
I
That
can
could be
start.
Jessie.
Yeah. It takes a long time. I would love to say that we start as soon as the solicitation is out. Like, no, we are always scrambling at the last minute to get everything together. But it does help to start with the attachments that you mentioned in the overview. We get the attachments done first. Because we are the administrator or the project manager, we get that out of the way while an artist is doing their statement. And then we use the statement to kind of guide the rest of the application. We write the narrative, but we are like that artist statement and their vision is kind of like what's forefront. And we base everything around that in addition to like site selection and why it is where it is. I think highlighting those things. The other thing that's important for the administrators is if you know you are going after this project, set aside money to get the designs. Knowing that you might not get awarded, but like part of the grant is to have design ready, full-fledged designs. Set aside money to pay the artist to get those designs ahead of time. If you don't get the grant, you can apply next year, or you have a package that you can go to another funder or a sponsor for. I think that is so crucial to getting that done early and like knowing that if you want to do something, to set aside money when you're figuring out your budget.
Monica?
Yeah, so the grant is very, very time consuming, and I've done it a number of times. I would say it takes me 1 month working full time to it really like yeah, 40 hours a week, 1 month to get the grant done. Okay, that's the amount of time I've spent typically. And probably the first time I did it took me even longer. So it is a huge amount of work. And so yeah. So and I've done the grant many times. It still takes a really long time, right? There's just a lot. And there's budgets, you have to come up with a concept, you have to do design drawings, you have to do a lot of things. So yeah, you've got to block, people who think you can do this at the last minute, not a chance. Start thinking about it maybe and plan for next year, but start, right? Because you've got to find a site, you've got to get an agreement from the site owner, you've got to figure out, and there's so many, if it's a historic building, make sure if it's a historic building first, don't propose a project in a historic building. You're not going to be allowed to do stuff on it unless it's temporary, right? If it's temporary, fine. But you're not going to be able to make alterations on it. A lot of buildings are historic. Just look it up. You can look it up. You can literally Google search and find out. So yeah, I think it takes a lot of time. It is, but I think that the process of writing grants is also useful for artists to try to figure out, if it's something that you're interested in doing, then coming up with the concept for it and figuring it out and, coming up with design ideas. It's actually a useful mental exercise if this is something you're interested in. I think for me, I was interested in doing public art for a long time. And and I decided to basically do the kind of practice I was doing and sort of try to bring it into an outdoor format. And, I wanted to, and I think you have to be, but I think you have to, yeah, it takes a lot of time. It's not easy. There's a lot of writing involved. But you don't have to fill up everything. I mean, you have to get all your attachments, but I think you don't have to fill all the space. You can have short, right? You can make things shorter and more concise. Sometimes that's good. But I think the grant is confusing, I will say. There's so much repetition in it. I will say, I mean, I don't want to complain about it, but literally each question repeats things from another question. So like this last time, you guys had something called a project statement, where you basically wanted to repeat every single thing that's in the grant. And that was a brand new component that I think was unnecessary. You already have an artist statement. And then in the project statement, you even wanted us to talk about fabrication methodology. It's confusing. I think it's important for you all to look at how to make it more manageable for artists and arts administrators, that you're not, the budget comes up in 3 different places. Why? There's like one form that's online and it's in different categories, okay? Then the form that then you're supposed to upload, which has all different categories. So it's really hard to match up the numbers because your categories are different names. And then you have also a budget narrative. So the budget shows up 3 different times. And, it's hard to make them correlate properly. So there's a lot of time spent on numbers and things. So just to warn people, but yeah, I think the budget section on the grant needs to be streamlined because it doesn't match up. It's confusing for all of us. Even when we get the grant and then have to do the new budget, it doesn't match up. You have different categories on different forms. I think this is an issue, but yeah, the grant takes a lot of time. But I think it's, people that are interested in doing it, it's definitely a good exercise to help us envision big projects and new ideas.
Antoine, I know from experience working with other organizations, sometimes the artist drives the project and the application with like they pick an organization that maybe doesn't do public art on a regular basis. And so the artist is the person that drives it. But I know Nicholson tends to take more, I think, of a project management like Southwest Bid. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, I think I was extremely privileged in this, like in terms of that project to work with Nicholson because, yeah, like seeing the application process, I don't think I would have, given where I was at the time, I wouldn't have had the time to like do all that was needed. And so working with Nicholson, like I think like Allison has done this multiple times. So like I'm as an artist, I have my ideals. I'm working with a nonprofit who has a director who gets paid and has the experience to spend the time working on it. So she'll just communicate with me. It's like, hey, we need these things here. This needs to go here. This needs to go there. I need to get this, and this permit. And she has her connections already there. So it felt for me, I mean, it was still a lot of work, but it was like way easier if I was, just getting started and wanted to do it. Like yeah, like with what Monica was saying, it's like so much. So even, and it felt like it was a partnership that like I was, working with Nicholson and working with Allison. And so we were like, it was like 2 people working on this thing together. Um, and so like, and just for the artists out there, like, yeah, like outside looking in, like it's easy, like you see the finished thing and you're like, oh wow, they were able to like traverse all of this, but just know it's not always just the sole person doing it. Like Monica is amazing being able to traverse all of that. But like, yeah, working like I had the privilege of working with someone who like knew, they just knew like how it goes. Um, but like just individually, I have like by myself done plenty of like proposals. And I will say, like, I agree with Monica, like, time is like really important. Like, do not wait to the last minute. Like, not even just give yourself enough time to do the proposal. If you can, give yourself time to like think about it. That's like really, really important. Like, research the grant, research what you want, read the guidelines over and over. Make sure you're giving them what they're asking for. Because, you can have an ideal in your head. Um, think like like rely on your resources, right? If you know someone, because like what, especially specifically with this grant, if you're someone who just like paints, you love to paint or you love to sculpt, that's a skill set. But like this grant is asking for, and a lot of other proposals, they're asking you to do a lot of other skill sets, right? You're asking you to write, to come up with a budget, to like go get permits, right? Those might not be skills if you're starting out that you have yet. So try to lean on people who you may know in your community who have those skills and it can help you with that process. Like, don't feel like you have to do everything all by yourself. If, um, also, something that I do a lot is I look up who are the past awardees, and who are they like what type of grants are they getting. And it doesn't mean I like shift what I'm doing, but if you're saying, hey, we're here to serve a community and we're trying to engage it this way, you need to know that's how I need to frame what I'm already doing. But I don't hesitate to like reach out to people who've already won something and say, hey, what was that process like? Right? And because also like they'll give you like the real like, and so I feel like things like that are just really important. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a
Well,
good point, Antoine. And also, if you have an idea, email the public art the public art group, Carrie and other people. Just run it by them. I have had a few friends who applied for things and didn't check to make sure that it qualified as public art. So just run it by them. Send a quick email, right? Would this
Yep.
count? Is this right? Before you go spend hundreds of hours working on the grant, just to
Yep.
make sure. Don't you think that's a good strategy? And definitely, yeah, reach out to folks. I always, I've helped many people with their grants. So definitely reach out to people, and especially people on the commission. They also give trainings, right? You have those
Oh, yeah.
workshops. So very helpful to attend those for sure.
thank you for mentioning that, Monica. And I want to just kind of interrupt for a second and say thank you for the shout out. Yes, folks can contact me about the application if you have questions. We take questions up until a week until the grant is about to close. If you go on our website, you can pull up the RFA from last year so you can get an idea of what the application looks like. And you can also go on our website and find other grants that we have. We have Art Bank, Art Exhibition grants, Civic Commission projects, rarely, but we have Color the Curb, Juried Exhibition grants, Murals DC, and of course the Public Art Building Communities grants. So again, go on that website, explore. There are workshops. This is going to become one of the workshops that I'm going to suggest as a training because I want to thank our panelists because you guys have said, I would say 99% of everything I ever wanted anyone to say about public art building community. So thank you very much for participating. And now I'm going to turn it over to Dwayne and we're going to go to questions and answers.
So a few quick questions. What is a bid? Because somebody doesn't know what a bid is.
Yeah, a bid. So BID stands for Business Improvement District. We are the organization that manages a place, a neighborhood, providing clean and safe is like the core of it, but also doing placemaking, public art, community events, economic development, all of the things that kind of would go into making sure a neighborhood is thriving.
Gotcha. Do you need to be a DC-based artist or organization to apply for this grant?
Yes, you have to be either one. If you're going to apply as an individual artist, you have to live in the district. And if you are in an organization, you have to do more than 50%, 51% of your services, your place of business has to be in DC. for this grant. And I know it's different for different grants, but for this one, you have to be in the district.
Now, somebody else asked a question that is related. If you are an individual artist that lives outside of DC, but you partner with an organization that serves DC, are you able to still provide service?
Absolutely. And that's what Anton was, why I invited, part of the reason why I invited Anton, because he was an artist that was with an organization. And again, the organization has to be in DC, and the organization's bids have a little flexibility in who they bring in, because again, they may have their own arts programs. And so they're already curating artists and they can be out of the district. But again, that's a great way if you're outside of DC and you want to work here. Find an organization, find a bid. And you can, again, all this information, you can go on and look up bids in DC and they will list all the different ones that there are. And again, there are also different organizations. Again, Nicholson Project is a great one to work with.
All right. I understand on sculptures, parks, how do you use photography in outdoor spaces?
Um, Again, Monica, I think, utilizes photography with some of her work. But if you think about how you can translate that photography into materials, like people use photographs and have it fabricated onto, say, different types of nylon or fabrics that can go outside. You, as the artist, have to figure out how you're going to attach it to a building or a space, but that is definitely a medium that can be used in public art.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's
Go
been some mountings of photographs on permanently on walls too. I think
Yeah,
there's
absolutely.
it can be done. It just depends on what substrate you put it on, what material.
And yeah, and that's where you have to have a little bit of a construction background. That's going to be something where you have to go through, look at different projects. I also want to mention the e-museum. Go to our website. We have an e-museum of past public art projects. So you get ideas. And like Monica said, if you can get in touch with the artist, you can have a conversation with them if they're amenable. Not everybody is, but most people are willing to talk to you about their work. And just do research. How do I take photographs? What am I going to do? Am I going to put it on nylon? Like Monica said, what substrates are I going to need? What kind of hanging systems am I going to need for an external project? Temporary is a little more flexibility in your choices. If you're thinking permanent, then you really may have a conversation with someone who does that kind of work, or people who work in construction. Because again, you'll get an idea of how you can do that.
Must the work be exterior or can it be located inside a building that is open at no cost to the public?
No, it must be exterior. It has to be outside. We don't fund, because again, even if it's a building where people can come in, we're looking for impact. We want the general public to be able to see these artworks. These works are a part of DC's landscape, so we want it to be on the outside. We do have collections that are inside buildings. For studio artists, Art Bank is one of the grant programs where you have things that go into district buildings. But for public art building communities, we are looking at the landscape of DC, so it has to be outside.
Would conservation of a mural qualify as a new work of public art since it would be changing the now faded colors?
No.
Uh,
Yeah, this is for new work. It is not a conservation grant.
are there restrictions about which states and cities projects can take place? Are these projects all DC based?
All of these projects, we're a DC grant. We're funded by DC tax dollars, so our projects are in the district.
I will say some of the same questions that are asked with by us for these grants are some of the same questions that are asked in other states as well. And so you can take this information and apply it across the board. You'll need to think about permits. You'll need to think about materials and connecting with community. So this information is still applicable, even though you may be outside of DC, looking at how to apply in other places.
That's a really good point, Dwayne. This is a good template for, like I said, a good public art project because we're asking for a proposal. Sometimes you just apply and they commission, so they select artists based on your work. But if they don't do the project management piece for you, um, this is kind of the how-to for your project. So even if you don't apply with us, definitely take a look at the RFA and see some of the type of things you're going to need or some of the things that you would find in a public art project.
The process seems so daunting for a novice to public art. How can an artist take an idea and make progress to making it real? Is there a way to assist in a current grantee or maybe case studies to read?
There are, again, we have some other workshops like this one on our website, but one of the reasons why I invited an arts administrator is because she just explained how folks can kind of get a start with RFAs for organizations, and then they kind of do some of the project management. So again, you want to talk to the different arts organizations in DC that do this kind of work, bids, Main Streets organizations. Also, if there's social organizations that have done public art projects, if you see somebody's got a mural on the side of the building and maybe a food bank worked with someone to put that project together, again, you go in our e-museum and see, oh, so and so did a project here. This bid did a project here. Contact those bids, contact those organizations, say, hey, I'm an artist. This is my work. How can we partner? I will say public art across the board, not just in DC, they want to see you do projects that incrementally are more and more in line with the budget lines that we provide. So if you're an individual artist and you're going to apply for $75,000 in a grant funding, then they're going to want to see that you have projects that have, or at least close to that in your portfolio. So maybe you come up with an idea that is less. Maybe you have done murals. Say you work with Murals DC and you get a mural project there, or Color of the Curb, you get a project there. Maybe your proposal is for $30,000, $40,000. That, people want to see that you can manage the amount of funding that you're getting, and you have already managed the amount of funding you're getting. So you do smaller projects, you do temporary projects. You figure out a way to make that happen. Again, the folks here have really given you a lot of information about how they approached projects, how they kind of got involved in projects, and how they ask artists to come work with them. Public art is a lot of networking. Like I said, it's a team sport, and even making that transition from studio to public artists, you've got to get out there and find those opportunities and possibly create those opportunities. Find other artists who are interested and do mural projects together. There are also other organizations in the city that do murals, and then you can grow from there.
I'll also follow that up. Talk to there was part of the question was is there a way to assist a current grantee? You can reach out to the past grantees. I know that Monica mentioned earlier, like she's helped a bunch of people in their process. So maybe talk to Monica, maybe talk to others and see how things might develop in getting some support on your progress and process. Another related question, how does one get started? I spend hours applying. I have two projects, but that experience is clearly not enough when competing with artists who have several. All I seem to get are rejections. I know I can do the work successfully. It's disheartening. Also, you might have answered this, but do you only accept DC artists?
Again, if you're applying as an individual artist, you have to be in the district. If you find someone to partner with, they can select artists outside of the district. So if you're outside of the district and you want to work in the district, you're going to have to find an organization, a bid, a Main Street, a community improvement organization to work with. And I feel your pain about applying. But the reality is we only award for the past 3 years, there have been at most 3 to 4 to 5. So it's a highly competitive grant. What I recommend is maybe look at sponsorship dollars so you can create projects. Look at developers. Developers often put out RFQs, RFAs looking for artwork. Participate in our other programs, Art Bank, the Color the Curve, Murals DC, when those grants become open. It is tough, and it is a challenge. Um, Jessie can speak a little bit that she applied for a grant and it was not awarded. So she came back the following year and reapplied. So I know I wish I had a magic wand and could say, hey, we can award everyone, but it truly is a process. Now, what I also say is the district is not your only option. There are public art granting agencies in Virginia and Maryland. They have similar processes with their grants. It's not quite as heavy, I think, in some of the grant applications. So you just kind of have to keep trying.
And I'll speak to that as well. Before I joined staff, I applied for multiple grants, not in public art, but in the standard grants programs, and I it took about 3 years before I actually got an application through and succeeded in getting granted. It is competitive, but you can succeed. And so after attending a few workshops, learning more about how I'm writing about my work, because I didn't necessarily change the work, it was the way that I spoke about the work. And so uh, it takes time, it takes practice, but it is a process.
Thank you for reminding me about that, Dwayne. We do debriefs. So if you're not awarded a public art building community grant, you can schedule an appointment with me. We start those. We do it a little bit after the application process, but you can get feedback. And as I was mentioning Jesse's project, it was an issue of specifically people had questions. And I always say this when you write a grant, let somebody else read your narrative and then have them explain to you what what they got from it. Because people come to me all the time and say, I thought I had this great idea, A, B, and C. And I'm like, I read that grant application. I didn't get A, B, and C. So let somebody else read back to you and explain to you and make sure that what you want and what you want to go in that narrative is being thoroughly explained by what you're writing. Again, it's a team sport. There is no shame in finding someone that writes grants well to help you with some of the narrative parts of it. And like I said, once you've done a public art project, make sure you document it when you're doing other work in the community so that, again, you're making sure to carry that over into the application process so you can really, really explain what you're doing. I don't select the work. We have panels that select the work, and these are people who are architects, landscape architects, arts administrators, previous grantees, installation artists. So they really are pretty good about if they see something that's a gap in the application process, it can really sink your application because there's not an explanation. So you really want to make sure, again, you're explaining everything and you're getting experience out in the community.
I want to name that we are 2 minutes over time. Acknowledge that. And so we have 10 questions that are still in the inbox. And so we're going to, I know, right? But we're going to get through these. But we'll do some more rapid fire Q&A. Hi, Jordan Lee here from Amy Caslow Gallery. We currently have an open call for submissions for an outdoor sculpture at a new living community, the Fitzgerald of Palisades on MacArthur Boulevard. Do you have any advice for marketing RFPs to make sure artists in the community are aware of this opportunity?
That's a great question. Everybody uses, social media, Instagram, Facebook. I use LinkedIn, which is funny, but it does reach folks. There are public art organizations that you can specifically market to. There's American Arts still has a listserv. There's the Public Art Exchange. They specifically are working with public artists and they take notices. There are sculpture magazines. There are public art magazines. There's forecasts that will, again, these organizations will post your RFQs, your RFAs, your RFPs. Then they're developing email lists, tagging agencies. I mean, there's just a lot of different ways of reaching out to artists. And it's just, you just have to figure out the best way to do it. We struggle with it here at the district. It's gotten better because we have community outreach folks. So I don't know if you have a community outreach person on staff. I know a lot of times it's a one-person band, but maybe making sure that you have enough time and for marketing so people can find the RFQs, A's and P's, so that they know that the project's out there.
Can I jump in real quick? CodaWorks is another place to go to post for public art. Email your listserv and say, please share the word. We email every RFP. We email our roster of artists and we say, please share this with your networks. And then we've been told in the past that if we tweet at the commission, they might repost it on Twitter. So I don't know if that has actually happened. I'm not our social media person, but we've been told that in the
It
past.
should be.
Yeah, I was going to say, I am also not our social media person at the commission, so I do not know how often that happens, but it can. It is possible. Quick question. Is this only open to bids or can Main Streets also apply?
Yes, Main Streets can apply. You just have to be a 501(c). So yes. And again, read check that RFA out. Definitely. It also talks about the rest of the eligibility requirements.
There is a rich history of public text-based art. Would such a thing qualify for a grant or does it need to be visual?
Say that again?
Wait a second. There is a rich history of public text-based art, so large-scale prints of text. Let's say a large poem placed on the wall. Would such a thing qualify as a grant, qualify for a grant, or does it need to be visual?
I think text is visual. Again, it depends just on the aesthetic. Sensibility of the panelists. So, it's a crapshoot. So you might want to think about it. Go through our e-museum, see what's been applied. As I showed projects in the beginning of this presentation, some are also a little different and have a different. I think if you explain in the narrative what you're going for and how it ties to the community, I think a text project would be appropriate.
Yes, I've seen projects that were funded through the commission that were large scale poems, but then they have a photo with it, and so there's room for interpretation. What is best practice for how one should approach a site owner to get an agreement?
I think best practice is just kind of a professional kind of, have your portfolio, contact them, go online. Now everybody's information is online. So you go online, get their email, get their phone call. I think if you introduce yourself with an email, follow up with a phone call, I think that's one of the best ways to get folks to respond. Anybody else want to throw in on that one?
Get someone to introduce you if you know, right?
Yeah.
Like maybe meet someone on the bid who knows the owner if it's a business owner.
If you have a rendering, I think that's always helpful just to show what your idea is. And I think that helps people connect a little more.
Yeah.
And this is a question to Jessie. How much money would you suggest putting aside for paying artists ahead of time for their design?
I think it kind of depends on the project. I think so I don't remember off the top of my head how much we paid the artist for the underpass, but because that was more of just a rendering, I think it was like I want to say it was like 500 to $1,000 for each artist. But if it's if the artwork needs a fabricator or if it needs multiple quotes of other kind of labor involved, I think that's a little bit more. I think it just, unfortunately, there's no magic number. I think it just kind of depends on what the project is and like how many partners are involved.
We look at least up to 20% of the commission grant amount to be a part of the artist design fee.
Right,
Which
for the final design, yeah, for the
Yeah.
final project.
goes into the next question. What is a good practice in compensating artists for their design and proposal for the grant? It takes a few rounds for the artist to put something together to be submitted for the grant, and art administrators want to be fair and respectful of their time. Thanks. I think you may have just answered that. So,
And I think also it depends on if the artist is also the project manager. If they're managing themselves, then along with the design fee, then they should be getting the a set amount, an hourly amount for project management. If they're going to do the fabrication, then an hourly amount for fabrication. And if they're doing the installation, an hourly amount for the installation. It should be, a fee that is reasonable, and then that is comparable to what other folks who were doing those when you're trying to figure out your budget. If the organization is figuring out what the design fee is, then that's something you have to negotiate with the organization because every organization is going to be different.
another question.
Can I
Well,
jump
go
in real
ahead.
quick?
Jump in, Antoine.
For artists, like, because it can be scary to negotiate with an organ. Like, I would just say, don't be afraid to like have that conversation. Um, I know, I don't know if they have specifics for this, but I know Wage is an organization that like gives you references to like how much you can get compensated for working with different institutions depending on their budget. I don't know if this is a part of it, but I just know, especially like early career artists, it can be really intimidating to like go to say, hey, can we talk about money and payment, but don't, it's a part of it. And I think you should get used to doing that.
That
It's a
self-advocacy is key.
and it's a business. So definitely.
I also want to note there have been some very useful information shared in the chat, both regarding where to share RFPs and sharing like that type of information, as well as info uh, on the scale for artist fees and navigating and negotiating. So feel free to check that out in the chat. Next question to all. Is there a sample budget is there a sample budget and overall application available for applicants as guidance? So is there an example application or a sample budget that folks can use just to figure out how this should look?
There is a category. Email me. You can email me at Kerry, Kerry .Kennedy at dc.gov. But it also on the resource page of our website, you should also be able to find those budget documents.
All right. Next question. If an identified site does not fall within a bid area, is there a way one can still work with a bid?
Probably not. The bids are working. Yeah, I'll let
We have boundaries that we work within. If it's maybe adjacent, we still might know the property manager or know an organization that can help you. I think if it's like directly adjacent. But we like legally have to work within our boundaries.
And when there isn't a bid available, this might be an opportunity to work with an organization that's in the area. and figure out a partnership that may be that the best fit. All right. Is there space for a community member to partner with a bid or organization on a public art project that is already conceptualized?
There absolutely is, but again, you have to make room for community input and engagement.
I would agree with that.
And lastly, hello and thank you for this informative panel. I hope this is not too much off topic. I am a recent graduate in interdisciplinary studies, humanities, music minor, and an aspiring emerging curator. Is there any quick advice to someone who is interested in becoming an independent curator? Any advice for first-time grant applicants?
Okay, so we have a curator, Dr. Michelle May Curry. She's my parallel grant manager, and again, she does art exhibition grant and the juried exhibition grant. So again, similar proposal process, way less documents. Again, look Michelle up, have conversations. We're here for your questions. So call us, let us know you have questions. More, I think you'd get more information from Michelle that would be specific for curation. Again, you can go look at past grant applications and calls so you can see the type of information that will be asked. And also for everyone, sign up as a panelist. That would also help you as a first time or a new curatorial person looking, or anybody looking to get a grant. If you serve on a panel, you really get to see how people look at grants, how they weigh them and rank them, and it'll help you with your grant writing abilities. So I would say an extra step would be just to reach out, because we kind of have specific things we have to have on our application. So if we know you're interested, it would be good to know that early so we can continue to balance out the panel. So that would be some of the advice I'd give on that.
Indeed. And for those who are with us live, I just added the link to apply to become a panelist. So please join us as a panelist. And you don't have to be in DC proper to apply to be a panelist. So definitely look into that. I want to thank our panelists, Monica, Jessie, Antoine, our moderator, Kerry Kennedy. Thank you very much for this very informative session. I know I learned a lot, and I'm in the organization, and so I'm very grateful for this time. And so we are doing these sessions monthly. These will be the business of the arts will be exploring different aspects of the business of the arts. And so that will be our next session will be in February. Please look for the announcement. If you have not already joined our newsletter, feel free to visit us at dcarts.dc.gov and sign into the newsletter, opt into the newsletter, and learn more about who we are, how we are showing up in the community, and the artists that are in your community. Thank you very much for your time. Take care. Be well.
Thanks.
Thank you.